esteemed honor today to have this woman on the podcast with me today. This is none other than Elaine Lankford, and she and I are from the same hometown area, the 757. We are in an entrepreneurial community and so much more. And when I tell you, y'all, that it feels as if I have known this woman for years and we have only known each other for a few months. This is the type of spirit she is. Welcome to the Power Transformation Podcast, Elaine.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me. And I'm so honored to be here with you.
The honor and the pleasure is all mine because you are a guru. You are a legend in my books. Whether you think so or not, you, girl, are doing some amazing things, not just locally, but globally. And we're going to get into that soon. But I always like to start with a nice, fun, lighthearted icebreaker question so we can get to know more about you. Elaine, my question for you is, when you were growing up, who was one of your favorite musical artists?
Oh my gosh, I was such an 80s kid. So I am a Bon Jovi girl all the way.
Oh, yes.
John still has my heart. And Living on a Prayer was probably one of my very favorites
Yes,
of their
living on
hits.
a prayer. Yeah, that is it. Yes, that is so fun. That's a really exciting way to get started. And for anybody that's listening or watching this and you don't know who Bon Jovi is, please Google it. You got to hear their songs, just amazing. So thank you for that. Now, with that being said, when I first saw a picture of you, but also when I met you, you have this jazzy, stylish look to you. You look amazing. And so externally, I can see you for how you look. But once I got to know you, there's such a light in you. But my question to you is, if a person were in a room just talking and chatting it up, and they were waiting for this woman named Elaine Lankford to show up, and they didn't know that you were hurt, and they would come up and say, "Hey, what do you know about her? Who is Elaine Lankford?" What would you say?
Wow, that's such a great question. So I would have to say, hey, that girl is such a hard worker. And let me tell you, if you need a friend, she's a listener.
Mm.
And I've had lots of people tell me that, man, that girl will make you feel like you're the only person in the room when she's talking to you.
Wow. That is definitely important because people want to be seen, people want to be heard, and for you to say that a person can feel like you're the only one in the room, that speaks volumes for your character and for who you are. And so, in terms of that being who you are, if you could sum up for us what you do professionally in terms of a job title, a career title, entrepreneurial title, whatever, what would it say what you do and who you serve?
So it's so funny. People play around with the initial CEO a lot. And so I have chosen to do Chief Empowerment Officer because
Oh,
I tell people if you hang around with me long enough, I'm going to make you believe you can do anything.
mhm.
But my focus right now is on aspiring Christian females who want to get into entrepreneurship and helping them finally launch their businesses, ministries, and nonprofits.
Mm, that is a task. That's a task, but it has to be, for me, I would view that as definitely a calling. Everybody is not built for that. Although I'm an entrepreneur, just like you, I will tell people quickly, I am not a business coach. That's not my niche. I'm a transformational specialist. I will help empower you. I'll give you the tools you need, but building a business is not what I do. I go to a coach for that, right? And so, what's so interesting though, Elaine, is that people can see you now and say, wow, for her to do that, she must have always aspired to it. But let's go back some. Let's take us back. Tell us a little bit, because to be a business coach, you've got to, or a coach in general, you've got to have a heart for service and to really want to be there for people. And so, share with us from just your earlier years, What's one of the earliest memories that you have in terms of you being led to serve in some shape or form?
Well, I've always been a church kid. I was born and raised in church, and so service came naturally. It's part of my upbringing is to give back. But my biggest thing is that I can remember in sixth grade having the call to go into nursing. And I can tell you the classroom I was in, the window I was looking out, when I heard that small, still voice tell me that that was what God had for me. And so my whole trajectory through high school and then getting out of high school was to go into nursing. And
Mm,
so that has been my honor and my privilege to have been a nurse for over 16 years, starting out in oncology nursing and then moving into pain management. And so my servant leadership came out in that profession.
mm. Wow. What did nursing teach you most about yourself?
Nursing is a growth catalyst. Like it pushes you to levels of leadership that you don't see inside yourself. At first, it was just me serving on a floor. And then I learned that I had the ability to lead. And so as an RN, I had to lead the team on the floor. And then eventually I was leading a hospital team that was looking into pain management. And then
Mhm,
later on, I was leading myself out into the practice of being a nurse practitioner. And so leadership has been a thread throughout my life that I
mhm.
didn't know I had and a
Wow.
gifting that he's given me. So influencing and leading other people have been deeply, deeply a part of my life.
Now, that is a good segue here, and we'll go back some to more of your journey. But the fact that you said up front that you help Christian women specifically launch their businesses, help them on their entrepreneurial journey, and how being a servant leader is definitely the root of who you are. When we are recording this, it is June of 2025, and you recently came back from something that's quite extraordinary. Without going into too much detail yet, let us know a little bit about the fact that you serve more than just here in the US. Talk to us about how being a servant leader has expanded even around the world.
Absolutely. One thing about God is he's a door opener and he's
Mhm.
just waiting us to have the faith to go through the doors. And so I've had the privilege and the honor to be able to now travel to Nairobi, Kenya since February of 2020 and
Mm,
start opening some doors for some females over there. And we're doing the same thing in the States that we're doing there, helping females rise into entrepreneurship so that they can rise above the poverty line, helping them take care of their families and start to take care of their communities.
mm. And that you are doing. And I think it is so important and imperative that people do that and that they see that, I've traveled globally. I even lived in Mexico at one point. And I think it's always good when other people in different countries can see that those of us in Western society are not just all about ourselves and
That's
aren't
right.
just takers, but we're also givers. And I think that's really important to clear up those misconceptions. And so, if a person sees you now to see you as this powerhouse entrepreneur, speaker, leader, writer, etc., how did you transition, Elaine, from nursing into entrepreneurship? There's got to be a story there that has led you to where you are today. Take us back there. And if this was a truly intentional shift, or did God direct you in that path?
Yeah, so there's definitely a whole God story behind
Mhm,
that. And so, as I was in my career and kind of advancing in the area of pain management, one of the things that I noticed as I practiced in the hospital is as patients left, they were not getting the same care, and I wanted to be an answer. A solution to that problem. And so that's when I went and got my nurse practitioner. And I was very pleased to be able to practice for 3.5 years in the area of pain management in a private practice here in our area with a local physician that I truly adored and thought well of. And so, as we're going through this amazing journey of treating these patients and then helping, uh, things started to shift in our state, particularly, and we're shifting across the country. See, pain management came into its heyday around 1999, right at the start of the 2000s, where everybody was supposed to need treatment and things were changing in the regulations of hospitals and other places. But by 2008, it became very controversial.
Mm.
Again, we were looking at a rising addiction rate. We were trying to figure out where that was coming from. And unfortunately, as in every field in medicine, there can be bad actors. And so there'd been some bad actors out there. And our practice was unfortunately overshadowed by all of these things that are going on in the atmosphere. And in August of 2008, our practice was shut down. And we were told to see our last patient and to send everybody else home. And it was devastating because we
Wow.
had worked so hard, all of us in the practice, to rise to national credentials, to make sure we were doing it right. And to just have everything stop on a dime was devastating. And I found out that they were actually opening up a case against the physician that I work with.
Oh
And
my gosh.
in that whole process, it was very unfortunate that people decided to make an example of our practice, and a case was opened up against me with no patient complaints, no family complaints. It was completely driven by the state. And all of a sudden, after practicing so solidly for 16 years, I found myself in a position of having to defend myself on a daily basis, and it would go on for about a year.
Okay, pause here. That's a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah.
That's a lot because wow. Ooh, okay.
Mhm.
This can go in so many directions. And listeners, viewers, oh my goodness. If you can relate, it may not be the same exact situation, but this is quite intriguing. Take us to the moment, and I know that you use the word devastating,
Mhm.
understand. But if possible, take us to the moment when you got wind of all of this. Take us to that very moment. What in the world, Elaine, was going through your mind? How did you feel? Were you in shock? Take us there.
It's just a typical day in the office. We were most of the way through our day. It was almost 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I
Mhm,
was rounding off with a patient. I got a knock on the door from one of the aides that came and said, "We need you for a minute." And I had no idea. Typically sometimes they would pull me out to speak with the physician or something else was going on.
mhm,
And when I stepped out in the hallway, the look on her face, I
mhm,
knew there was something more. And she said, "We need you in the conference room." And that's when I walked in and found my physician at the time sitting with one of the state regulators. And they were like, "Elaine, we have to stop seeing patients." And I was like, "What is
mhm,
happening right now? How can this be?" And so I was, had to kind of pull myself together to go back to the room and finish up with that patient and not raise
mhm,
alarm bells. And my face has never been a poker face. And my patient was so kind at the time. They kind of knew something was going on. I really couldn't tell them anything. And when we had finally cleared the office and the regulator just kind of walked out after he had done his job of closing the practice for the day, we just kind of sat there and thought, what is going to happen next? But
mhm.
more importantly, what is going to happen to all of our patients? Our immediate thought was the care of our patients. And
Yeah.
we knew that we were kind of an outstanding practice. There were very few in the area practicing pain management at the time at the level we were. And we had thousands of patients to worry about. And then the next thing was just kind of figuring out how it went into, as a nurse, you learn to triage. We went into triage mode. What are we going
Mhm,
to do first? How are we going to do it? How are we going to take care of them? And then let's worry about ourselves. And in the days and the weeks that unfold, as we kind of went through that process, it was very numbing. It was very numbing. And then it just came to a point when the interviews started that we couldn't quite understand why we were not given the benefit of the doubt, why it was so one-sidedly seeming. Like how can you look at someone's career that has been there for
That's
so
right.
long and in a minute decide before the jury is out, right? Decide that
Hmm.
this is over. And so it was just quite numbing. And then as those interviews went on and I realized that they were going to also try to include me. And you have to understand they opened one case. I was involved in hundreds of
My
patients.
goodness.
One case. You think, Jesus, what is happening right
That's
now? Like,
right.
what is happening right now?
Wow.
So yeah, it was hard. It was the hardest moment in my life to go through.
And how does that moment or just the not even the moment, but how in the world does that persecution of sorts? I mean, that's really what it was, but how did that influence your own reflection or thoughts of your identity?
Wow, you know what? It really plays on you because you
Mhm.
start second guessing yourself.
Mm,
And, in those weeks and months and up to a year when I was in this process,
mhm.
I went over I went over things over and over and over in my mind and just could not see what it was that they were seeing. In fact, bringing evidence forward to prove that many of the things they accused me of were not correct, only to be inundated by more questions. And you just start to become um doubtful of, did I do something wrong? Was there something there? Or you start to kind of think, God, are you punishing me for something? Is there
Mhm.
something that's going on? What is happening with this? It would take a lot of time for me to kind of go through this process and
Mhm.
sit with myself to one, understand that bad things do happen to good people.
They sure do, girl.
Bad things
Mhm.
do happen. And if I had not been through it myself, I wouldn't have believed it. It's one of those situations you
Mhm.
have to go through to believe it. And then, God just gave me the story of Joseph. And we all know that Joseph was accused of something he didn't do, and yet he suffered the consequences.
Mhm.
And this was,
And briefly, with some of our listeners and viewers who aren't Christian,
yep,
w-
yep.
briefly tell that story of Joseph that you related with.
Yeah, absolutely. So Joseph is a character in the Bible. He's going along and he's younger. He has these big dreams. His family thinks he is just such a dreamer. They don't really believe him. His brothers end up getting jealous of him because of his father's love and adoration for him. They end up throwing him in a pit, literally, and then trying to sell him off as a slave. And as he's traveling through this process of being taken to another country, he's brought into Potiphar's house, who is a guard, a government official, if you will, in the region at the time. And he gains favor with Potiphar. But yet, in this process of doing good, even in bad situations, Potiphar's wife comes along, and Joseph apparently was a hottie, and she tries to seduce Joseph. And when Joseph refuses her advances, she accuses him of rape. And because Potiphar is who he is, he cannot disagree with his wife, whether he believes it or not. And he ends up having Joseph thrown in jail.
Mhm.
And Joseph would serve almost 2.5 years in jail. He'd have some um, relationship with some of the prisoners who were also thrown in jail, help them, and then ask them not to forget him because they were servants of the Pharaoh at the time, which is the major king figure. And yet they forgot him, and he remained there for a while longer.
He sure
Joseph,
did.
he sure did. Joseph is this
Quite a
person who
while.
went through
Hmm.
trial and trial in his life from about
Hmm.
17 years old, they say, until almost his 30s.
Hmm. Yeah.
Constantly being pushed down, constantly being pulled at, again, being accused of something he was totally innocent
Mm.
of, and yet suffering the consequences.
Exactly. And so, in relation to your story, Elaine, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I see the comparison in it felt metaphorically as if you were thrown into that pit and sentenced for something that you didn't even do. And so I can only imagine in that time period, would you say that your faith was solidified more, or were there moments where your faith was really tested and you started to have some doubt?
It's absolutely a crossroads in my life. So not only am I going through the situation that starts in August of 2008, but in December, my father, who's the glue of our family at the time, passed away. And then
Who
by the next May, my husband at 47 is diagnosed with prostate cancer. He's fine now, by the way, for the listeners who are
praise
listening.
God.
He is
Yes.
cancer free, no problems. But at the time, in 2008 into 2009, my entire world crashed and was in ashes. And we have to bring up another character in the Bible named Job. Job is a character in the Bible who lost everything. And yet he leaned into his faith. And here was the crossroads I was sitting at. Would I lean in or would I run away? And in the Christian faith, we know that you and I know there's a lot of people when these circumstances hit, they doubt their faith. They walk away
Mm-hmm.
from God. They walk off into a life that is more miserable. And I decided to lean into my faith.
Mm-hmm.
I just had to know if this God that I had been told about my whole life was true or not. And so I asked him. I said, God, if you're real, I need to know that you're real and I need to feel you right now in
Mm-hmm.
these situations, in this time that I'm going through. And I need to know that you are who you are. And so this is how my journey back to real life started, is when I tell people this is the second chapter of my
Mm-hmm.
life and when I feel like life really started. But it took that moment in time, that crossroads, to draw me to that place of
Wow.
where he was ready to truly start using me.
Oh my gosh. That is this could see, I'm a visual person and I'm seeing everything on like screen as if it's a movie because it really could be aspects of your story pulled into a movie. Now, during this time span when you're no longer nursing, were you dependent on your husband's income? What were you doing for money?
Oh my gosh, this is such a good part of the story to go back
Mhm.
and tell people. And it wasn't fun at the time, trust me,
Mhm.
but absolutely the practice was shut down. There was no employment. It was unreal that I could not pick up any work whatsoever. I did have a couple of
Wow.
job offers, but because of the nature of everything that was going on, it makes you unhireable. People are scared. And
Oh.
people in this, you have to remember, people in our community knew me. I had 8 physicians write letters of recommendation for me during this process. They had watched me come up through nursing school. They knew
Mm.
my integrity, and they thought, if they do it to you, what would they do to us? And so that was a hard row to row. And so for the
Mhm.
first 2.5 years, I was absolutely dependent on my husband, who was a rock, never doubted me, always in defense of me. And we found that God was about to teach us the biggest lesson of all, is that he can take care of you. And so we went through this crazy period where literally there were times we were down to $50 in our bank account. We did not know how we were going to pay our bills, and people and money would just start showing up. We would get refunds we weren't expecting. I had a very good friend who loaned or actually donated money to us. Our parents came around us and helped us. Of course, we did practical things like sell off some things that were unnecessary at the
Mhm.
time to keep. But people really loved us through this process, and we saw God's hand move in our life in a
Yeah.
way we had never seen at that point. And it solidified for us that we could trust him.
Indeed. And it shows not only can you trust God, but it shows how God works through people. I often say, God is not a genie in a bottle. Yes, miracles happen. Don't get me wrong, miracles happen. But the fact that people saw a need, people in your community, and it was laid on their heart from your character and your integrity to say, hey, I want to come out there. Now, other times, Elaine, I'm sure money came and it was totally miraculous. Like, how did this come? You know? And so that really goes to the power of leaning into your faith. And that's even a word for me as well as others too. Is I know from my experience, yes, I typically lean into faith. I'm going through a season of my life right now that I've never been tested in my life, and I'm being stretched. And it is a reminder to lean into my faith because God has not broken any of his promises. And, you know, even though my podcast isn't a quote unquote Christian podcast, I'm very open with my faith and who I am. And I love my followers for that. And it's because whether a person shares our faith or not, the
Mhm.
fact of the matter is, I have learned in tough times, it is quite foolish to depend on yourself. And even in good times too. And so, therefore, while you're going through all of this, it's literally as if you're going through fire, but yet you're coming out unscathed. But during that fire, there's a time for refinement. There's
Mhm.
a time to be molded and shaped into something even greater, which leads to who you are now. Going through all of this, take us to that moment, Elaine, when you knew that entrepreneurship was the route for you and that you were just not called, but chosen in this area of service to help women entrepreneurs. Take us there.
Sure, absolutely. So part of my comeback, I want to just say, is was truly servant leadership. In those moments when I didn't know what to do with myself, and there were many where I sat for hours in my driveway just trying to hear from God, just reading the word, meditating on music, doing anything I could to distract myself from what was going on. There were many
Hmm.
things he dropped in my soul, and I started journaling. And so I wrote down little things that would come to me or little images that would come to me, and I would document all of that out. And that went on for a good part of probably a year and a half. And it was so disjointed and it was random, and I didn't really think about it, but I kept all of these things as reminders of what God was teaching me and showing me as I went through the process. Um, and as I leaned back into just kind of getting back out of my own head and I went up to my church literally and just folded worship folders. For those of you who are in church world, you know what that is. I just assembled church folders for a long time just to get out of my head and out of my space. But as I'm going through this process of leaning back in and just trying to serve wherever I could, I heard God say, I need you to put it in a book. And I went, oh no. Oh no, nobody's going to
Mm.
understand this, God. Like this I went through all of the emotions. I went from frustrated to surprised to numb to
Mm.
all feeling guilt for whatever. Like I must have done something wrong, right? Guilt, depression, just all of these emotions that rolled through, and I thought nobody's going to understand that they
Yeah.
were wrong and I was innocent. Like, who's going to
Hmm.
believe that? This entity that we all like hold dear and true, right? But there's probably many people in your audience who have been through trials like that where someone has leaned into them expectantly and they were innocent. And so we know this happens in our society, but you still feel the shame and the guilt of it. And I thought,
Yeah.
oh, I don't want to do that, Lord. So, but he pressed on me. And finally, I gathered all of my notes that I had been writing for a year or so. And I was looking down and I thought, oh, this is what you were doing in all of this time because my heart came out on that paper, my anguish came out on that paper, my
Mm.
tears, but also my lessons and also the hope and also the God winks, like people bringing us and helping us with our finances. And I started to just put all of that together, long story short. And I ended up in about 6 months compiling a book and I called it Love Echoed Back. I called out and he answered because I
Mm.
wanted people to understand if they called out to this God, that he was a God of love and that his love would echo back and he would answer them. And this is how he would fulfill that. And that if they would lean into him, he had answers for them. And so now I have this book and I
Hmm.
self-published it. And now you have to learn entrepreneurship. This was my step in because now you have the book, you have to talk about the book, you have to market the book, sell the book, go
Yep.
places with the book. And it pulled me completely back out. And I found
Mm.
out in that process that my story, as broken as it seemed, but yet with hope at the end, was helping people. And
Mm.
that telling my story was the answer, and that telling our stories is how we help heal other people.
Hold on. Telling our stories is how we help heal other people. Y'all, if you don't take anything else from this, that is the truth because I think that there are people, no, I know there are people out there who are withholding their voice out of fear, out of the sake of thinking of what others are going to think, or even people who don't think they have a story to even share. Wow.
My biggest punctuation mark was this. I tell people I had grown up in church. I was a bubble wrap Christian. I tease because nothing had gone wrong up until that point in my life.
Mhm.
And it is absolutely true that you cannot have a testimony without a test. And so I'd gone through my test, and now it was time to share my testimony.
Mm.
And that is what I have done with it from from then on. Like it opened up my world. I wasn't afraid to tell my story. People just got such great hope from it. I've had people tell me they've took my book because I did lay it with a lot of scripture in it. A lot of the scriptures God gave me are in that book, that they've used it as a devotional. They've gone back to it in their times
Mm.
of trial and depression and found something else in it that they needed. And so nothing is wasted. I just want to just really emphasize that whatever we go through in our lives and all of our experiences are bringing us to this point to one, create us to be the person he needs us to be.
Yeah,
And none of it is ever wasted.
that's right. And it has me thinking about the fact how you leaned into your faith and were so in tune with what God was telling you. And I know that sometimes people question, well, how do I know if God is speaking to me? It's different for everybody. In
Hmm.
some rare occasions, people hear God's voice audibly. Others can feel a sense or presence. Sometimes, people call it gut intuition. We as Christians call it Holy Spirit. But at the end of the day, Elaine, what do you say, for example, to a listener or viewer who may be a person who knows that they have an idea, they want to share their story, they may even want to start a business? And I know that your area is women, but let's just keep this general now. But maybe they've experienced the naysayers, they've experienced people shutting them down, and it's hindering them and blocking them from really putting themselves out there. What would you say to them?
Please don't be silent.
Hmm.
Please don't let the world or culture or other people dampen your voice. God has given you that story and that voice for a reason. And the Bible tells us, for those of us that are Christian, that we can only be comforted because we're comforted by the one who knows how to comfort. And
Hmm.
he's building these stories and these experiences in us so that you can help pull somebody else out. We can't all speak to
Hmm.
everybody. Like my story doesn't apply to everybody. Your
That's
story
right.
doesn't apply to everybody. That's
Hmm.
why there's so many stories, because your
Yes.
story is unique and it needs to grab a hold of another segment of the population that needs it. And so don't hide your story. Don't hide your
Hmm.
light. You are you are bigger in his eyes than you
Hmm.
believe, and you are going to change more lives than you think if you just tell your story.
Oh, yes, indeed. And telling the story for you also meant, yes, you were going to start your own business and company, but you also knew that although you had done nursing for many years and you led in that capacity, you knew that you wanted to shape even more into being a greater, more influential leader. And so what you did was in 2017, you did John Maxwell. And for people who may not know, John Maxwell is a leadership guru. I mean, that is a name synonymous with him is leadership, John Maxwell. What did that program or what you learned from those teachings, what did it not only teach you in terms of business, but more importantly, how did it refine you even more as a servant leader?
See, what I love about John, and if you don't know John, his writings are very easy to read. He's a prolific writer. What I love about John is John sees people for people. And John is a faith based person who has learned to infuse his faith into
Mhm.
what he does without what we say beating people over the head with a Bible. I love that John actually lives his faith and he is a living testimony because of that. And I wanted more of that. I wanted to be able to infuse my faith in a way that I could attract people and help people, but not beat them over the head with it. Like I didn't have to physically say it for them to know that I'm a Christ follower. I could show them. And that's what a lot of us love about John. Plus, his principles are timeless because he has really gotten to the root of people and how
Mhm.
to treat people and how to communicate with people. He's such a great communicator, right? He can break big topics down into small things. And yet he is just larger than life because he lets the Lord lead him and he loves on people in the way that he knows that he's supposed to.
Mhm.
And I just think he has made such a mark and an impression on all of us that he's such a great person to look up to and how we can really do what the Bible tells us, love God and love others. And I wanted more of that. And I wanted that in the entrepreneurial space because I think there's some beautiful people out there that are faith based that are struggling with how to integrate their faith into their business. And it's really
Mhm.
just all about being the hands and feet of Jesus. They
Yes.
sometimes just need permission to do that. And so that's what I love. And I love that I'm in that space and learning how to do that better and better all the time.
Hmm. And with that, and learning that, it opened up the opportunity, as we said early on in the actual interview, for you to be global and to actually go to Kenya. Was that always on your radar? And how did that particular instance for you to come to Kenya, how did that happen? And share with us how that is making such a huge difference in the lives of the women overseas.
Absolutely. So along my time right after I got my John Maxwell certification and um, knew that I wanted to do some coaching, God had really just laid on my heart that He wanted me to raise up His daughters. Now that might be a little Christianese for some of you, but like He wanted me
It's
to
okay.
raise up. In other words, He wanted me to be a catalyst for other women. And I
Hmm.
just started it's like my eyes were open and I started to see all these wonderful women that I knew their stories, I knew their testimonies, I knew what they could do for someone else and they weren't moving in that direction.
Hmm.
And I knew entrepreneurship could be a catalyst for them because not all of us can be on stage at a church, or not all of us are going to be on church staff, or not all of us are going to serve within the four walls of the church. There's plenty to do outside of the church.
Hmm.
And so that was an avenue that God just seemed to be moving me in, and I feel like He's really doing a lot in what we call the marketplace, which is business and nonprofit work outside of the church these days. And he gave me a concept for something called the She Steps Forward Conference. And I planned it out for 2 years, did a lot of networking here in the area. And in 2019, I launched the first She Steps Forward conference in Suffolk, in northern Suffolk area here. And we had about 60 ladies come out. They were very interested in finding their
That's
purpose. We
good.
called the first one She Steps Forward into Destiny.
Hmm.
And we entertained 15 women vendors. We supported that conference. We had 3 women-led nonprofits that we gave
Wow.
something to, whether physically or whatever, to help them in their mission. And I just sat back and watched. And yet, right before we got to the conference, God being the funny God that He is, just wanted, I guess, to show off because all of a sudden I got an email and I don't even know how this happened because I did not have a big marketing budget. I was just barely out on the on the internet at that point.
Hmm.
I got an email from a lady from Kenya. And at first I thought I have won the Kenyan lottery. Like, you know how you get those emails? I'm like, I don't know about this. But
Yeah.
I went back, something made me take a second look, and there was something very sincere about what she was asking and what she was seeking for. And I emailed her back. We had a conversation by email. I gave her the link to the conference and I thought, this is not going anywhere. And then 2 weeks later, she bought a ticket.
Oh
And so
my.
my very first conference, we had our first, not only a few people from out of state, but our first international visitor from Nairobi, Kenya. And so Teresa came. We got a chance to really talk during conference. She actually had family here on the East Coast, which I didn't know at the time when she was emailing me. And so she was going to stay in the States. We got a chance to know each other for a few days past conference. And she just simply asked me, would you come to Nairobi? This is something our women need.
Oh,
And so, technology being the great thing that it is, we planned it out for over a year on WhatsApp and Zoom. And in February of 2020, before the whole world shut down, I landed in Nairobi, Kenya with three other people. And we did our first She Steps Forward international conference there. And we had 60 ladies from 5 different African countries show up.
oh my gosh. Y'all, oh wow. February of 2020. It was intended to be because who would have known that following month? That is amazing. And what I am gleaning from this, and I want everybody out there to really get this, is that all it takes, it don't have to take a bunch of people. It take one person, the one right person to be in the space with you, the one right person to be attracted to who you are and your story.
And your
All it
story.
takes is one right person to be in the room with you because that one person opened up the opportunity for you, Elaine, to be able to go to Kenya and to make a global difference in people's lives, and just not with one country but 5 other African countries. That is absolutely incredible. And so you just left there a couple of weeks ago. Tell us
Yes.
about this most recent trip over there.
Yeah, absolutely. So while we're planning things here in the States, the progress continues in Kenya almost faster than I can keep up with. We've been
Mm.
going since 2020, holding conferences. This year, not we had 100 ladies who for the first time bought a ticket to conference because we're changing the game. We're teaching them a higher mindset. We're giving
Mhm.
them a chance to learn how to fish, not giving them the fish.
Yep.
Stepped up and bought their ticket
Hmm.
and came to conference. And we were so blessed that in this 5th year of sowing that we reaped great favor. We had 3 high-level female government officials with us at conference. I was able
Did
to meet a
you?
fourth the next day, all of them trying to empower women in their country. And so we now have some favor with the government. We'll be talking with them. We'll be working with them together to elevate women in the country. And
Hmm.
we're also blessed with some great media presence that will now be watching and following us. But the most important thing that happened was that we had started a 4 woman cohort in the
Hmm.
fall through Zoom. I have wonderful people on the ground in Kenya now after all of these years who are my spiritual kids, and we worked with
Wow.
them one-on-one on Zoom to get them from ideation to launch. And we were able at conference to present them with a certificate and we're giving them a seed grant, and we are officially registering them in the country as we speak. And we
Oh.
have at this point now worked so hard. We are launching our first 4 real life entrepreneurs, and we have many more to come because at Conference Girl, God is so good. We had over 35 women sign up for our next online conference starting
Oh.
August this year.
Oh my gosh. Oh wow, that is incredible. And are you selling tickets now for your online?
So for Africa online cohort, they will be
Mhm.
taking care of the process on the ground over there. So they'll be paying for their online
Oh,
cohort, and then
okay.
we will be doing our American conference in March of 2026. So you can be looking out for us
Oh.
in the fall as we also are going to start a beta cohort here in the States since that went so well, and then have conference in March, and hopefully we'll be launching some American entrepreneurs come here soon.
Oh, that's wonderful. And I will put all of your details in show notes so that people can learn more. But as we start to come to a close, I have about one more question, but let's just take a quick transition here. If somebody wants to reach out to you because they're interested in having you to help coach them, they want to launch their business, refine it, they just need some expertise from you, or they want to even read your book or simply donate to things that you have going on, how can people connect with you, Elaine?
They should reach out to me at Elaine at shestepsforwardcoaching.com, which is my personal one-on-one coaching site. They can also get more information on the nonprofit piece at shestepsforwardinternational.org. So either She Steps Forward Coaching or She Steps Forward International. We have social media under those taglines. You can find me by email under those two domains, and I would be more than happy to have a conversation.
And what about your book? Are people still able to purchase that?
They can contact me directly for a copy of the book.
Okay.
I'm hoping to relaunch that later this year with an expanded version of
Look
it.
at you, girl. See, look at that. You're like, I'm going to do a revised edition,
Yes. Yes.
second edition copy of the book. That is incredible. So, Elaine, I could talk to you all day, but I am curious to wonder this about you.
Mhm.
Seeing you stand in such strength and you stepping forward in everything that God has for your life. Share with us, what does being resilient look like in your life? And how do you continue to apply resilience principles day by day as you are working with others in being as highly successful as they can be?
I have a verse that I live by, and it's
Hmm.
Luke 145, and it says, "Blessed is she who believed there would be a fulfillment of what was spoken to her by
Hmm.
the Lord." And my resilience comes out of that belief that whatever he speaks, he's going to fulfill in my life. And it's a matter of door walking or walking through the doors that he's opening for us and just believing that what is for us is on the other side. And so
Hmm.
I really like emphasize to people, one, you got to believe, you got to know it's going to be fulfilled. And when that door opens, go through it. Everything is a journey in this life is a journey and a path. And we just need to keep stepping forward one step at a time and let God give us the strength to keep pushing through.
Hmm. And lastly, Elaine, thinking back to 2008 when your entire life was just turned upside down, or so you thought, but it was actually the right side up way of things having to go. Thinking back to 2008 and thinking about to when things were a bit uncertain, if you had the opportunity to talk to you in 2008, when although you were leaning into your faith, you still just had no idea which way this would go, what words of encouragement would you have given to yourself?
Wow, I love that question. So I would just have to say, girlfriend, lean in. He does give beauty for ashes. You are not even going to recognize yourself in 10 plus years. You're not even going to believe the places that you step into, and that you are absolutely stronger than you think right now.
Mm.
Go forward.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Power Transformation Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow or subscribe, leave a 5-star rating, and write a review. It helps us inspire even more listeners. And don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who could use a little power in their transformation. Until next time, keep bouncing back, keep rising, and be good to yourself and to others.